영어 동화 세상 리틀팍스
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Chapter 1, Mystery at Sea. In the year 1866, something remarkable happened at sea, a mysterious and baffling phenomenon. Although sailors were especially excited about it, the general public, even those who lived far inland, heard the rumors too. For some time, vessels had been encountering an enormous thing at sea. This thing was a long, spindle-shaped object. People said it occasionally glowed, and it was larger and more rapid in its movements than any whale. On July 20th, the steamship Governor Higginson met the thing 5 miles off the east coast of Australia. At first, Captain Baker thought he was in the presence of an unknown sandbank. He was about to determine its exact position in the ocean when 2 columns of water shot 150 feet into the air with a loud hissing noise. 3 days later, another ship spotted the thing, but this ship was 1,500 miles away, in the Pacific. 15 days later, and 2,000 miles away, 2 more ships encountered the mysterious object. Everyone began talking about the thing. They sang about it in the cafes, ridiculed it in the newspapers, and showcased it on the stage. All kinds of stories circulated about the object, causing editors of scientific journals to quarrel with believers in the supernatural. The subject was debated for 6 months, until a journal poked such fun at the topic that stories about the strange thing finally died. The topic seemed buried forever, but during the first months of 1867, new facts came to light. Suddenly, the thing at sea was no longer a scientific problem to be solved, but a real danger to be avoided. On March 5, 1867, a Canadian passenger ship, the Moravian, struck a rock that wasn't marked on any map for that part of the Atlantic Ocean. Had it not been for the ship's superior strength, the Moravian would have gone down, with all 237 passengers on board. The accident happened just as day was breaking. The officers rushed to the rear of the ship and carefully studied the sea. But they saw nothing except the surface of the water violently swirling about 1,800 feet away. The exact location of the place was noted, and the Moravian continued on its route without apparent damage. Had it struck a rock or an enormous shipwreck? The ship's officers had no idea. But when the ship's bottom was examined while undergoing repairs, workers found that part of the keel was broken. This incident might have been forgotten if the same thing hadn't happened a little more than a month later. Only in this case, the event caused a huge uproar because of the excellent reputation of the shipping line involved, the famous Cunard Line of England. In 26 years, Cunard ships had successfully made 2,000 Atlantic crossings without a voyage canceled, a delay recorded, or a man, a ship, or even a letter lost. On April 13, 1867, with a smooth sea and a moderate breeze, the Cunard's Scotia was crossing the Atlantic, headed for England. At a little after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, while the passengers were having tea, a slight shock was felt. The Scotia had not struck anything. Instead, it had been struck. The shock had been so slight that no one was alarmed at first. But then, a member of the crew started shouting, "We're sinking! We're sinking!" The passengers were very afraid, so Captain Anderson quickly reassured them that the ship was not in danger of sinking. The Scotia, divided into 7 compartments by strong partitions, could withstand any leak. Captain Anderson soon found that the sea was rapidly pouring into the 5th compartment. He ordered the engines to be stopped at once, and one of the men dove into the water to determine the damage. He found a large hole, 2 yards in diameter. Such a leak could not be stopped, so the Scotia was forced to continue on its way. The ship was then about 300 miles from Ireland, and after 3 days' delay, it finally reached a British port. When the Scotia was examined more carefully, the hole was found to be in the shape of a triangle. Something had punched its way through the ship's thick iron plates and then pulled out. From this moment on, the monster was blamed for any accident at sea. During the time that these developments were taking place, I was returning from a scientific expedition to explore the Nebraska Territory in the United States. The French government had sent me, Pierre Aronnax, on the expedition, because I am an assistant professor at the Museum of Natural History in Paris. After 6 months in Nebraska, I had arrived in New York City with a precious collection of minerals, plants, and animals. I was not due to return to France for a while, so I was busy organizing my specimens when the Scotia incident occurred. I was well aware of this unfortunate event and the debate over its cause. How could I not have been? I had read and reread every American and European newspaper without being able to form a conclusion. Something was out there, that much was certain. While I was in New York, the issue reached a boiling point. People had discussed a theory about a drifting island or reef, but that idea had been completely eliminated. How could an island or reef move at such fantastic speed unless it had an engine in its belly? For the same reason, the idea of a massive floating shipwreck had also been abandoned. There were only 2 possible explanations for the thing, and each explanation had its supporters. On one side were those who were sure it was a monster of colossal strength. On the other side were those who believed the thing was some type of underwater boat with tremendous engine power. But this second idea seemed nearly impossible. How could a private individual have a vessel like this at his command? Where had it been built, and how had its construction been kept secret? It was possible, however, that a nation might construct a submarine to use as a weapon of war. But rival countries are always watching each other. It was unlikely that one nation could have built a submarine without another nation knowing about it. Inquiries were made in England, France, Russia, Prussia, Spain, Italy, America, and even in Turkey. When the inquiries produced no facts, the hypothesis of a submarine was rejected. And so, the idea of a monster surfaced again. Upon my arrival in New York, several people did me the honor of consulting me on the subject. In France, I had published a 2-volume work, Mysteries of the Great Underwater World. Well regarded in academic circles, my book gave me a reputation as an expert in this obscure branch of natural history. By the time the New York Herald asked me to write an article on the subject, I had my own ideas about this monster. "20,000 Leagues Under the Sea", Chapter 2, Embarking on a Mission. As I wrote in my New York Herald article, there was only one good explanation for those mysterious events at sea: a marine animal of enormous power. "The great depths of the sea are entirely unknown to us," I wrote in the newspaper. "Who knows what creatures live 12 or 15 miles below the surface of the ocean? There is, however, one known animal powerful enough to pierce the hull of a steamship. The common narwhal, or sea unicorn, often grows to a length of 60 feet. Increase its size by 5 or 10 times, and you have a gigantic beast capable of causing great damage. The ordinary narwhal is armed with an ivory tusk as hard as steel. Some of these tusks have killed whales and penetrated ships' hulls. One Paris museum possesses a narwhal tusk that is 15 inches wide at its base and almost 7 feet long. Now, suppose that this tusk were 6 times stronger than usual, and the animal 10 times more powerful. Launch this weapon at high speed, and you would have a force capable of producing a catastrophe at sea. Until I receive more information," I concluded in my newspaper article, "I believe that the beast is a narwhal of colossal dimensions. Unless, of course, it's something above and beyond anything that anyone has ever seen or imagined." I realized that I was undercutting my argument with this last sentence, but I wanted to protect my reputation as a distinguished professor and not give the Americans any more reasons to laugh at me. After all, I had just admitted that I believed in a sea monster. My article was very popular, and soon everyone seemed to have an opinion about the gigantic narwhal. I still thought that it could exist. If huge dinosaurs had once roamed the earth, why couldn't an equally large narwhal cruise the seas? Some people saw the creature's existence as a purely scientific problem, but more practical people, especially in England and the United States, were determined to rid the ocean of this beast. The sea must be made safe for travelers. The United States led the way in this effort. In New York, preparations were made for an expedition to pursue the narwhal. The warship Abraham Lincoln was armed and ready to depart under the command of Captain Faragate. But as soon as it was decided to go after the narwhal, the creature disappeared. For 2 months, no ship encountered it. No one knew where to look for it. The Abraham Lincoln remained at the pier in Brooklyn. Suddenly, on June 2nd, a steamship on its way from California to Shanghai reported that it had seen the animal 3 weeks earlier in the northern part of the Pacific Ocean. Everyone was extremely excited. Captain Farragut did not want to waste another minute. The Abraham Lincoln was quickly stocked with food and coal, and I soon received the following letter at my New York hotel. Dear Professor Aronnax, the government of the United States invites you to join the Abraham Lincoln expedition as a representative from France. Captain Farragut will provide a cabin for your use during the expedition. The ship will be departing in 3 hours. Very cordially yours, J.B. Hobson, Secretary of the U.S. Navy. 3 seconds before this letter arrived, I had no intention of pursuing the gigantic narwhal. 3 seconds after it arrived, I felt my whole purpose in life was to chase down this creature. I was still tired from my long trip to Nebraska. I wanted nothing more than to see my country, my friends, and my little apartment near the botanical gardens. But nothing could hold me back. I forgot everything, fatigue, friends, and home, and accepted without hesitation the offer from the American government. Conseil, I called in an impatient voice. Conseil was my servant, who had accompanied me on all my travels. I liked him, and he liked me too. For the last 10 years, Conseil, whose name means advice in French, had followed me wherever science had led me. Not once did he complain about the length of any journey. He was ready to pack his suitcase, and mine, for wherever we might be headed, whether to China or the Congo. Conseil was a quiet young man, never upset by any surprises that life threw our way, and adept at any task required of him. He had even become an expert in putting plants and animals into their scientific classes. At the age of 30, he was 10 years younger than I. Conseil! I called again, as I began my feverish preparations for the journey. I usually didn't ask if it were convenient for him to accompany me, but this expedition could be hazardous. Conseil! I called a third time. Did you call me? He asked, entering the room. Yes, I replied. Pack up all our things. We're leaving in 2 hours. There's not a moment to lose. And what about your collections, the fossils and animal skins? The hotel will take care of them for us, I said. And your live, wild Indonesian swine? Someone at the hotel will feed it during our absence, I answered. I will give orders to forward everything to France. We're not returning to Paris? Eventually. I outlined our expedition on the Abraham Lincoln and asked if he wished to accompany me this time. Whatever you do, master, I'll do, Conseil replied. I urged him to think over his decision. There's an element of danger, I said. This is one of those trips that people don't always survive. Whatever you wish, Conseil said calmly. He soon had our bags packed, and we settled our hotel bill. I left instructions for shipping my containers of stuffed animals and dried plants to Paris. I arranged for the purchase of supplies for the care of my swine, and with Conseil at my heels, I jumped into a cab. At the dock in Brooklyn, our luggage was immediately taken to the deck of the Abraham Lincoln. We hurried on board, and I asked for Captain Farragut. One of the sailors led me to a small deck on the stern of the ship. A handsome officer held out his hand to me. Professor Pierre Aronnax, he said. Yes, and you must be Captain Farragut. The officer nodded. Welcome, Professor. Your cabin is ready for you. I let Conseil stow away our luggage while I watched Captain Farragut give the orders for the ship to cast off. A few minutes later, and we would have missed the boat. The Abraham Lincoln moved majestically away from the pier. The docks on both sides of the East River were crowded with spectators. 500,000 people cheered and waved their handkerchiefs as the warship moved down the river toward the harbor. By nightfall, we had left the lights of the city behind and were running at full steam into the dark waters of the Atlantic. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Chapter 3, Searching the Seas. Captain Faragate was a good seaman, worthy of the fine ship that he commanded. He believed in the gigantic narwhal and would not let anyone on board question its existence. The creature was real, and he had sworn to rid the seas of it. Either Captain Faragate would kill the narwhal, or the narwhal would kill Captain Faragate. There was no third option. The officers on board the Abraham Lincoln shared their captain's opinion. They constantly discussed the narwhal, calculating the chances of meeting it. As for the crew, they wanted nothing more than to hunt down the sea unicorn, harpoon it, and hoist it on board. To add to the excitement, Captain Faragate offered a reward of $2,000 to the first man who spotted the creature. All eyes, including mine, were on the sea. Only one person on board was indifferent to the chase and the reward, and that was Conseil. Captain Faragate had provided his ship with everything necessary to catch the gigantic narwhal. No whaling ship had ever been better equipped. But the Abraham Lincoln's best asset was Ned Land, the king of harpooners. Ned had been born in Canada 40 years ago. Quick, cool, and cunning, he had no equal with the harpoon. Originally from Quebec, the French-speaking part of Canada, Ned took a liking to me. Little by little, this quiet man and I got to know each other quite well. I loved to hear him tell of his adventures on the ocean. So, what was his opinion on the question of the marine monster? I suspected that he did not believe in the sea unicorn. By the end of June, we had crossed the Atlantic and would soon reach Cape Horn at the southern tip of South America. Sitting on the deck with Ned, I led the conversation around to the topic of the gigantic narwhal. I examined the chances of success for our mission. "But you don't believe in the existence of this creature, do you?" I said. "Is there any particular reason for that?" The harpooner stared at me for a few moments before answering, "Perhaps there is, Professor Aronnax. But Ned, you're a whaler by profession, familiar with all the great marine mammals. You should be the last person to doubt its existence. As a whaler, I followed many large sea creatures and harpooned a great number of them," he said. "But no matter how strong they were, neither their tails nor their tusks could have even scratched the iron plates of a steamship." I pointed out that there were reports of ships' hulls being pierced by the tusks of narwhals. "Wooden ships," Ned said carefully. "That might be possible, though I've never seen it happen. So, until I have further proof, I refuse to believe that whales or sea unicorns could ever produce the effect you describe." I told him my theory that the creature might have come from unknown depths in the sea. Using mathematical equations, I explained how water pressure increases as water gets deeper. Its body would have to be strong enough to resist water pressure equal to tens of millions of pounds. Then this creature must be made of iron plates that are 8 inches thick, like an armored warship, exclaimed Ned. "Think what destruction such a creature would cause if it hurled itself against a ship's hull at the speed of an express train." "Yes, well, perhaps," Ned replied, shaken by these thoughts, but not yet willing to give in. "So, have I convinced you that such a creature exists?" I asked. "You've convinced me of one thing, that if this animal lives at the bottom of the sea, it must be as strong as you say. But if it doesn't exist, how do you explain what happened to the Scotia?" Ned hesitated and then blurted out, "I explain it by pronouncing my conviction that it just couldn't be true." I stopped trying to convince Ned. Our ship sailed around Cape Horn and on to the Pacific. By the end of July, we had reached the northern Pacific, where the creature was last reported. The entire ship's crew was full of nervous excitement. They could not eat, they could not sleep. 20 times a day, someone thought he spotted our prey. For 3 more months, the Abraham Lincoln sailed the waters of the northern Pacific. The days seemed to last forever as we explored every part of the ocean between Japan and North America. We found nothing. No ship's crew had ever worked harder. The men did everything they could to find the gigantic narwhal. But now, the crew members were calling themselves fools for believing in such a creature. Every man wanted to catch up on his eating and sleeping, to make up for the time he had so stupidly sacrificed. There was only one thing left to do: go home. The men took this demand to Captain Faragate, but he refused to abandon the search. I won't say that they threatened to mutiny, but after their appeal to Faragate, they didn't perform their duties as well as they could have. At last, Captain Faragate said that if the creature did not appear within 3 days, the pilot would turn the ship's wheel toward home. Captain Faragate made this promise on November 2nd, and it rallied the crew. Everyone watched the ocean with renewed attention. 2 days passed, during which 1,000 schemes were tried to attract the creature. Large quantities of bacon were trailed behind the ship, but that only succeeded in drawing sharks. When the ship stopped, men went out in small boats to continue their search. But November 4th arrived, and still the creature had not made an appearance. The deadline would expire at noon the next day. Night was approaching. Large clouds veiled the face of the moon. The sea rocked gently under the stern of the vessel. At that moment, I was leaning over the railing. Conseil, standing near me, was looking straight ahead. The crew, perched in the rigging, was scanning the horizon in the growing darkness. "Come, Conseil," I said. "This is your last chance to earn the $2,000. If you will permit me to say this, I never counted on getting the prize." "You were right, Conseil," I admitted. "This was a foolish affair after all. We should have returned to France months ago." "You would be in your little apartment and in the museum," replied Conseil. "I would have already classified all of your fossils, and the wild swine would have been drawing crowds to its cage at the zoo in the botanical gardens. You're right, we'll be laughed at for this adventure." "That's for sure," Conseil said quietly. "I think people will make fun of you, and I hope you don't mind my saying so, master, but you deserve it." "What?" "You're a very smart man, so you shouldn't expose yourself to—" Just then, someone started shouting. It was Ned Land. "Look, over there!" cried Ned. "It's the very thing we've been searching for!"